From inside a radio booth at M&T Bank Stadium, it is the Banner Ravens podcast, broadcasting live on a Sunday night in November to recap the Ravens' dominant 41-10 rout of the Denver Broncos to improve to 6-3 on the season. We are going to dissect every single aspect of this game. The offense looking like an absolute juggernaut. The defense maybe taking a slight step forward against the Broncos today. All that and much, much more. But first, the Banner Ravens podcast is brought to you by Toyota. Toyota has been building a legacy of excellence for years, from developing hybrid technology to upping the standards of safety and efficiency. Toyota is always innovating, always making progress. And with a superior lineup of in-stock SUVs, including the adventure-ready RAV4 and capable, affordable Corolla Cross, you can experience the legacy of Toyota for yourself. Visit buyatoyota.com, the official website for deals, to find out more. Toyota, let's go places. All right, Jonas, word of the day time. We kind of did a combined effort for this one because you wanted to do perfect in honor of Lamar Jackson's perfect passer rating for the fourth time in his career, which ties an NFL record. But I said, I'm pretty sure we've already done perfect before because one of those perfect passer ratings games was last year. So I picked a synonym. I went to thesaurus.com and picked impeccable. My definition can't be pecked, but that's not the dictionary.com definition. Definition is faultless, flawless, irreproachable. Language of origin first recorded in 1525 to 1535 from the Latin word impeccabilis, which I believe is third declension. Lamar was freaking phenomenal today, Jonas. And how many times have we seen this guy absolutely dominate? And a week after maybe his worst game of the season so far, in which he still was not terrible, he came out today and absolutely put a hurting on the Broncos.
Yeah, you almost become, let me use another fancy word, inured. I hope I'm pronouncing that.
Why do you pick that word?
Because I'm just using it to say that, like, after a while, you just get like numb to the brilliance of Lamar. And I think it's incumbent upon us as
another good word,
Ravens commentators to point out when ridiculous stuff is happening.
Yes.
And a ridiculous thing happened today. This was a really, really, really good Broncos defense that they just ran roughshod all over. And, I don't know how many times a team has, I would imagine it's 0 times until today, has ever entered a game after a relatively big sample size, leading the NFL in yards per play, and then proceeds to give up a perfect passer rating to the opposing quarterback.
Yeah.
That's the stuff of fantasy land. It just doesn't make sense. And, Lamar, to do it without needing a dominant rushing game himself, I think he just has had the 4 yards today.
Yeah.
I believe
on 3 carries.
The only other start in his career when he had fewer than the 4 rushing yards was in 2020 against the Bengals. He was also banged up. We think he was a little bit banged up coming into this one, dealing with a knee injury, not especially mobile. Was not a great game for him. For that was the game where the Ravens won, but it was by strength of their defense. The Bengals were kind of like, all you really have to worry about on this team when Lamar is dropping back is Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews. And my how things have changed today, because Lamar, he still looked pretty, fresh and agile and dynamic. I mean, some of his kind of jump cuts to get out of pressure today were just the stuff that very, very few people in this world can do. But the 4 rushing yards didn't really matter because he was just spraying the ball around. Great day for Todd Monken. Great day for the receiving corps. Great day for Zay Flowers, who was dynamic again. Still looking for that 4 quarters of dominance. Just another first half where it sets the stage a little bit disappointingly for the second half, but I think he was still a really, really incredible guy. But I mean, who else is even in the conversation right now for MVP? It's Lamar with a bullet, and there's not really a close second.
See, I didn't even have to bring up the MVP talk here, Jonas, because you have brought it up, even though you said it's in your contract, you only talk about it once a month. But he's running away with the thing. He's on track to win his 2nd straight, the 3rd of his career. You looked at last season and you thought, what does he have in store for an encore? And you thought there were potential reasons for regression. You lose OBJ. maybe opposing teams would have figured out the Todd Monken offense a little bit. The offensive line was a massive concern coming into the season, and they are better by every metric offensively this year than they were last year. This is the best offense that they've had easily since 2019. It's the NFL's best offense by pretty much any metric you look at. I would take them over anybody. I mean, if for a playoff game with Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I mean, you look at the other teams who are near the top of the league in terms of offense. The 49ers, they don't have Brandon Ayuk. I mean, you have a great play caller in Kyle Shanahan and a okay quarterback in Brock Purdy. I still take the Ravens over the Niners there. The Commanders are up there. Ravens already beat them. The Bucks are up there. Ravens already beat them. The Bills are up there. Ravens already beat them. I don't know who else you would take. Maybe the Lions, who Jared Goff, as we record this, is off to a great start in that game as well. But I'd still take Lamar Jackson over Jared Goff. So in every single way, I would take this offense over any other in the NFL. And that's why the ceiling for this season feels so high. Even with all of the defensive struggles, Lamar is playing quite literally the best football of his career. And that is saying something for a guy who's had an unbelievable start to his NFL career.
And guess who we are not going to talk about today? Not going to talk about Keaton Mitchell because he wasn't activated.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to talk about Deontay Johnson because he didn't catch a pass today. But, obviously probably unreasonable for him to step in today and be any kind of an impact player after the short week of preparation. I think actually on one of the Lamar's better throws today, it looked like there was some miscommunication between maybe the route that he was supposed to run and the route that Lamar was getting, but it didn't matter because I think Lamar hits Mark Andrews on an outbreaking route and they keep on moving the chains. I mean, it is just like very, very funny to get to a point where this offense you almost feel better about this offense getting the kind of yards that it needs to on like 1st and 20 than 1st and 10. Like, oh, there's another Patrick McCary holding penalty. It's fine. We're just going to throw a quick hitting screen and Zay Flowers is going to get 15 yards or Lamar is going to scramble and make something happen. I mean, the only real bad things I think that this offense did today were, the second drop back from Lamar that ends up with a sack, the drop by Rashad Bateman, which, kind of out of structure. You want to give him a little bit of grace, but that's a, play that he has to make, especially coming off some of the stinky lines that were coming out of the Cleveland game. And then, maybe first half run blocking, but other than that, this offense was a machine against a defense that had not really faced an offense like the Ravens. But I think we all expected to at least keep them competitive. I mean, no, I don't think a single person in the national media or the local media core was expecting the Ravens to put a 40-burger on the Broncos.
No. And last week, the defensive miscues, the defensive mistakes overshadowed the performance by the offense. That was maybe the floor of the offense last week against the Browns. That was maybe their worst performance of the season so far. And they still put up 24 points. Lamar Jackson still had 280 passing yards, and they had only 9 more total yards in that game than they did in this one. They just scored 17 more points in this game. So if the Browns' loss was the floor for this offense, it is an incredibly scary thought for the rest of the NFL. I mean, they put up almost 400 yards of total offense last week. For reference, the Giants have scored 24 points only once this season. The Ravens did it in their worst game of the season. So they are doing it every single week. And even last week when their defense let them down, they still can score with absolutely anybody. The play that you were hearkening back to the early days of Lamar Jackson thrown to Hollywood Brown and a young, spry Mark Andrews. And there's been a lot of talk about the progression of Lamar Jackson throughout the course of his career. Maybe no better example of that today than on Lamar's second touchdown pass when he breaks containment. He's jogging to his right. He has plenty of green grass in front of him. Could probably run it in, but would be close, would maybe get it down to the 3 or 2 yard line and would probably take a hit. Instead, he doesn't pull it down. He keeps his eyes in the back of the end zone and he hits Zay Flowers on a perfect pass on the run. That was a perfect example of just how much he's grown as a passer. I know it's been a topic that's been talked to death, but he is an elite passer at this stage of his career. And it is remarkable that he is able to get as much out of this offense as he is. He is, yes, the play calling has been excellent by Todd Monken. Yes, Derrick Henry's been phenomenal this year, and we'll talk about him. But this offense would not be at the top of the league without Lamar Jackson playing at this level.
it's just ridiculous. I think probably my favorite throw of the game was I forget if it was on the same drive, but it's 3rd and 4, second quarter. You got Justice Hill running the wheel route. He's got like a half step on a Broncos defender. Lamar just boop, plops
Drops
that
it in the
thing
bucket.
in, and it is just absolute perfection. I mean, it was just a joy to watch him play. He was hitting those layered throws, which he's been doing
Yes.
since his first MVP season. He was, drawing up the defense and dropping off some of those screen passes that were, like gimme first downs every single time. He was finding Mark Andrews underneath for just those pockets in the zone where he turns and gets an easy first down. It was just ridiculous what he did today. I mean, 0.75 EPA per play, 0.3 EPA per play is like goated with the sauce status. So more than twice as good as that. His completion percentage over expectation today was 16.5. So his, what based on the modeling and everything suggested he should have finished with, which was 67.7%, which is again a really nice day at the offense. He finished with 84.2%. So it just goes to show after, a day against Cleveland where his accuracy wasn't all the way there.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of, I think a lot of that was certainly had to do with the Browns pass rush and the Ravens' own pass protection problems. But Lamar had the time that he needed today. And when he didn't, he was able to make time and guys were getting open. And it's just a really, really awesome offense.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned Zay Flowers having that 127-yard day, 111 yards of offensive receiving yards for Zay Flowers at the half, 2 touchdowns. He was getting right behind the linebackers, right in front of the safeties, time and time again. And Lamar was just dropping it in the bucket right over the middle of the field to him every time. And that just opens the offense up so well. And especially it opens the offense up for Derrick Henry, who gets more and more ridiculous, the stats that he's been putting up so far this season. You could not have scripted a better start to Derrick Henry's time in Baltimore than what he has had so far. I mean, when they signed him to that deal, it was 2 years and you were thinking 2 years, but they could get out of it after 1. It is absurd to think of them getting out of this Derrick Henry deal after 1 season. The way he has been playing has been utterly phenomenal. I mean, his 13th touchdown today. He scored 2 touchdowns. He has scored a touchdown either receiving or rushing in every single game this season. 106 yards on the ground, 1 catch for 27 yards. Those 2 touchdowns. He scored the first touchdown was his 100th career rushing touchdown. He went over 1,000 yards for the season on his touchdown in the 3rd quarter. We are in week 9, Jonas. Could you ever have imagined that this pairing would go this well?
Not with what we saw from the offensive line, because week 1 offensive line, Lamar
and what we saw from
Derrick
Henry last year behind a bad offensive line, Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always had the hope that Lamar would just be this slingshot for Derrick that could propel him to new heights, and that's definitely been the case. But if this Ravens passing offense wasn't going to be one that defenses respected, that was going to be a lot tougher. If this offensive line couldn't make things happen for Derrick Henry, then that was going to be tough. And I do think there still is some room for improvement on those inside runs. So many of his best runs this season have come on those pitches, and I do think they're going to have to be more balanced so that defenses can't sit on certain plays based on alignment, based on situation, yada yada. But this was pointed out by Brian McFarland, Ravens salary cap on Twitter, and I'm not sure if he got it from SpotTrack or he just knows it because he's a sucker for this kind of thing. But 13 total touchdowns is a $500,000 incentive for Derrick Henry. If he gets to 15 total touchdowns, so 2 more, that's another $500,000. If he gets to 12,000 rushing yards, that's another $500,000. If he gets to 1,500 rushing yards, that's another $500,000. So he is $500,000 of his way into a likely $2 million incentive based on what he and that in addition to what he already got. So
good for him.
Good for him. Maybe he'll pay for like a nice sushi dinner for the media or something like that. But just keep getting them checks, Derrick Henry.
Yep.
That's and obviously the big one at the end is 1,000 rushing yards and Super Bowl win. So he can make up to $2.5 million in incentives this year. And Like I said, I think 4 or 5 of those are definitely likely.
And I think that's actually the same bonus that we get for doing our 100th podcast episode, which I think either this one is our 100th Banner Ravens podcast episode or our next one. So I think we each get it's each 2 million, right? Isn't that our total?
$2 million.
Yes, yeah. All right. I mean, it's utterly absurd what he has been doing this season, and I feel like we're now at the point where we were last year, where we started to realize that this team was really good. I mean, this was an inflection point for the season for a lot of reasons. You're coming off that bad loss to the Browns. You lose this game at home, you're 5-4, and you're really starting to wonder about the trajectory of this season. You absolutely dominate a Broncos team that is probably not as good as its record, but is, still 5-4 after this loss. You're at 6-3 right now. You've gotten through the hardest part of the schedule, which was maybe the first 6 weeks of the season. And it feels like the conversation that we had at this point last year, where it's like you want to capitalize on this now. Now there's almost more pressure to finish the season with a Super Bowl appearance or a Super Bowl win, because seasons like this, we said this last year, seasons like this don't come around that often, but I guess they do because the Ravens have had 2 of them in a row. But you want to get everything out of this season as possible, because you just don't know how many more years you're going to have the best offense in the NFL. Probably not again for a long time. You don't know how long you're going to have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson playing at this level, and everybody around them playing at a great level right now. It's going to get harder and harder as Lamar gets older and his contract gets more and more expensive. So it's incumbent upon Eric DeCosta to do what he can at the trade deadline, and it's incumbent upon this team to get over the hump in the playoffs, because you don't want to be looking back at the season and say, what an unbelievable regular season they came up short. I hate to be looking 7, 8, 9 weeks down the road, but now that they are this good, they've established themselves as a premier team in the NFL. You want to make everything you can out of this remarkable season.
Yeah, and that's why I couldn't begrudge anyone who did some scoreboard watching in that blowout of a second half, because I certainly did. Bills go to 7-2 with a comeback win over the Dolphins. Obviously, the Ravens would have that tiebreaker if they finished tied with them in the AFC race. Bengals, obviously, they were, if they lost to the Raiders, imagine losing to the Raiders.
couldn't be this team that we're talking about being one of the best in the NFL. Certainly not at home.
The Bengals are
certainly not with a fourth quarter lead.
Living on a razor's edge with how they started the year, but they're up to 4-5, coming to Baltimore for a really, really important game in terms of just getting back. Possibly to 500 for that stretch run, scoring 41. So matching the Ravens there. They did it without D. Higgins. That is definitely of note. And then, obviously the Chiefs play on Monday night against the Buccaneers. So I think at this point with the 3 losses, it's, I think the best the Ravens can probably hope for is second place. I think Kansas City has gotten some injury luck, but they've been able to weather it. I don't really have a whole lot of faith in Houston being able to maintain what they're doing at 6-3, because even though they've got some nice pieces on defense, the offense just looks like a total mess right now. So
lost Stephon Diggs.
Yeah. And I think they lost starting lineman Kenyon Green to a season-ending injury. So, it all comes down to, can this Ravens defense be, competent? And I think for about 3 quarters today, they were definitely competent.
Let's talk about the defense, because there were some personnel changes coming into this game. Ravens got some guys healthy. They got Marlon Humphrey back for this game, although he was reportedly playing on a pitch count.
Yeah.
He was starting at cornerback in this game. Eddie Jackson goes from 69 snaps and the start last week against the Browns to a healthy scratch against the Broncos. Really telling sign of just how poorly he played in that game. Marcus Williams reinserted into the starting lineup. He made his impact felt right away. He had the first tackle of the game for 1 yard or no gain. There were some iffy moments as well for Marcus Williams. It's not like he put all the doubters to bed. He did allow Bo Nix, quarterback, to score a touchdown over him on 4th and goal from the 1 yard line. They also had Jalen Armour-Davis not active for this game. He was out with a knee injury. David Ojabo, another healthy scratch. I don't really know what happened to his season. I mean, a season that came in with the expectation that this was going to be his breakout year potentially. And he goes from starting the season with 5 good weeks to having back-to-back bad performances and now back-to-back healthy scratches. So Ravens are doing what they can to figure out the problems on defense. They did shut the Broncos out for the second half of this game, Jonas, but do you think they took any steps forward? Or do you think that this is just a bad offense led by a rookie quarterback and they got a little bit lucky?
I think they definitely got a little bit lucky. I mean, you look, you move past that first drive, which ends with an interception. They get to the Ravens 44-yard line and have like a terrible, fourth down play. Just go for another tush push. You're probably going to get it. Next drive, they get to the Ravens 33. That is the one that ends with what? I forget exactly what the other fourth down stop. Oh, is that the one where I think they just missed to Troy
Franklin in the corner of the end
Yeah.
zone, where they
Gets like a step or two on Arthur Mollett.
Yes, they brought the house on a blitz. It looked like maybe, I'm not sure if it was Franklin's fault for like hesitating on that route. The ball was just overthrown in the corner of the end zone, but better ball. That's a touchdown.
I mean, Bo Nix stunk out loud at various points today. Let's be real. That this was such a level up or such a level down from like Jameis Winston, from Baker Mayfield. He just, he obviously has a dimension that neither of those guys has in terms of like his fourth year. Like Baker's not really, he's a scrambler, but he's not a speedy scrambler like Bo Nix is.
Yeah.
And Jameis Winston is obviously a little bit more statuesque, but then you get the touchdown on the double reverse. Then you get the field goal just before halftime where they go, they basically cover 60 yards in about 3 minutes. And then, obviously you get to that second half and it goes a lot better because the Ravens don't allow a first down on the first drive, don't allow a first down on the second drive. And then the next two drives end in the red zone, but Denver is thwarted. So, you could say that a reasonable offense, a more competent offense probably would have finished with closer to 25, 30 points. But you could also say that a more regular team wouldn't have as talented a defense as Denver did. So I think, I just watched the movie Challengers last night, Paul.
Wow. I haven't seen that one.
One of the plot lines is Zendaya's husband, played by Josh O'Connor, or no, not Josh O'Connor, the other guy.
I don't know.
He's trying to work his way back into kind of fighting shape ahead of the U.S. Open. It's a tennis movie for those who don't know. And so she enters him as his coach into a challengers tournament, which is like a lower rung tournament, basically a spot where you can get yourself some confidence ahead of the main event. And I feel like this was a challengers type setup. Like there's not really a whole lot of scary dudes on this Denver Broncos offense. Cortland Sutton went for over 100 yards today, but the Broncos running game, which I thought would be a potential thorn on the Ravens side today, did not do anything. Bo Nix missed more big throws than he made them. Wasn't really a whole lot of offensive creativity for Denver besides that double reverse pass, which was barely completed. So I think the fact that the Ravens were able to survive without Marlon Humphrey at full strength, without Travis Jones at full strength, with a really, really good pass blocking that they were going up against. I don't know if it's the springboard that you would ideally have been looking for going into Cincinnati, but it was definitely better than so many alternatives.
I did not in any way predict a challengers reference on this podcast, but good for you, Jonas.
Yeah,
kudos.
I'm a cinephile.
You are a cinephile. You're very well read and also well watched.
Well read in that I read the subtitles in movies.
There we go. This game from the defense kind of felt similar to the primetime showdown against the Buffalo Bills, where remember the Bills were moving the ball for a lot of that game, and it wasn't until that weird trick play where they get a strip sack of, I don't even know if it was technically called a strip sack because Josh Allen got the ball back. So they force a fumble on Josh Allen. They get the ball back, and all the momentum of the Bills offense is halted. It felt like that game because the offense in that game, the offense in this game for the Ravens was so dominant that they scored every time they had the ball pretty much. So the pressure was so much on the Broncos to push the ball downfield. I think if this had been a much closer game, if the Ravens offense had struggled more, I think the Broncos would have put up more points, but they had a rookie quarterback. They don't have great skill position players. And the Ravens kept making it a multiple score game to the point where the Broncos had to throw the ball to come back into the game. And that was not their strength. I mean, their strength is running the ball. So I think that this performance from the defense is notable in that it wasn't a disaster, because we said that about the Browns game. We said all they can do is just not have a disaster, and they did have a disaster against the Browns. So at least they did the baseline, which was not allow Bo Nix to come into M&T Bank Stadium and throw for 300 passing yards.
Yeah.
But there were still some curious and disconcerting signs.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we are going to have, we're, 46 hours away from the trade deadline at this point. I think it's 4 p.m. on Tuesday, and it is 6 p.m. right now as we're recording. The Ravens did have a top 5 for right now pressure rate. They got after Bo Nix on about 37% of his dropbacks. I will say, though, and just looking at the average time to throw, this is probably unduly influenced by that just spinorama scramble that we got there, where Bo Nix made a couple guys miss and then ended up with like a 2-yard completion. Denver's average time to throw today, 3.72 seconds.
I think that was a no gain, by the way.
Okay.
He did all that for no gain.
Which is just a huge outlier. It's actually only the third slowest of any team this week. And then you spin it forward to what awaits with Joe Burrow. He is 2.57 in this week. So it is going to be a much quicker trigger coming into Baltimore with Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
You wonder, is T. Higgins going to be healthy? Because obviously I think the Ravens have done, unsurprisingly, so much better when it is just Jamar Chase that they have to worry about, not T. Higgins. Obviously, both those guys lit him up in Cincinnati the last time they played, but that would be a big departure. That would be a big absence for Cincinnati and for the Ravens if T. Higgins can't go. So you take, the successes that you can get. Tavius Robinson, 2 sacks, just more effort sacks than high quality, teach tape. Trenton Simpson coming through as a blitzer, finally starting to look a little bit more like PQ on some of those obvious passing downs. But I don't necessarily think that if I'm Eric DaCosta, this is going to sway me in the direction of we're good with what we have.
Right. Yeah. And not to belittle Tavius Robinson getting those 2 sacks, because obviously, like you said, that they were high effort sacks. But I do think this is an example of how sometimes sacks are a misleading stat, and that's why we often look at pass block win rate. We look or pass rush win rate. We look at
pressure rate.
Is often the hardest phrase to say. Pass rush win rate. Yeah, it's a tongue twister. Pressure rate, time to get off the line of scrimmage, stuff like that. Because the first sack for Tavius Robinson was really just a Bo Nix scramble, and he kind of slid down at or behind 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage, and Tavius Robinson was just kind of the first guy to touch him. They gave him a sack for that. And then the second one was pretty much a coverage sack. Bo Nix still had a lot of time back there to throw before Tavius Robinson closed on him. So I do still think that this is a pass rush that could use a body or two at the trade deadline. And they are without Michael Pierce, who is on the injured reserve. But they could still have used, and Brent Urban was also not active for this game. So they could still use some help there. I do think we saw a little bit of improvement in this game from Trenton Simpson. There was the one play where he kind of left a guy, I believe it was Javonte Williams, over the middle of the field, wide open, when Bo Nix was kind of scrambling to his right, threw across his body. Not an advisable throw, but they complete it for a big gain in the first half. That was one kind of miscue that he made. But I think Trenton Simpson overall, I think finished with 7 tackles, finished with a sack. He's taking strides, definitely. But still, the middle of the field is a little bit too exposed at times for this Ravens defense.
Yeah, and I think I don't know enough about scheme and everything to say this with like 100% certainty, but I do think that this defense is a little bit more like scheme proof, a little bit more versatile.
Yeah.
On those obvious passing downs when you have nickel personnel on the field, 5 DBs instead of dime or quarters with 6 or 7, because I just think that, as a offensive line, if you're, kind of sitting there on your heels, wondering who's going to come, you have to fear about the physicality and the strength of a linebacker, knocking you over or running by you more than you do if it's just like the kind of one-dimensional aspect of speed of a Kyle Hamilton coming off the edge, or Arthur Maulet coming off the edge, or Darius Washington. I think, obviously the intangibles that Patrick Queen brought to the table last year as that guy who could, run over running backs, who could run by guards, who could run into guards and free up Justin Madubuike on some of those pick stunts, is something that has been very, very obviously lost. with him going to Pittsburgh, and if Trenton Simpson can begin to kind of replicate that, because they're not really getting a whole lot of Roquan as a blitzer right now,
Yeah.
then I think that's going to help them and help Zach Gore be a little bit more creative going forward.
They're really not getting a whole lot from Roquan as a blitzer. Even when he's being used in that role, it just feels like either the offense knows it's coming and they have somebody already ready to block him, or Roquan's just not able to beat his guy.
Do you want to take a guess at how many tackles he finished with today?
Roquan? I mean, less than 5?
3.
Not great.
That is his fewest by 3 tackles this year.
Geez. Couple other things we should talk about before we get out of here, Jonas. Special teams, not bad. Justin Tucker may have doinked that extra point attempt on the first touchdown, but it went in. Tylan Wallace downing a punt at the 2-yard line. How about that? Tylan Wallace with a 21-yard punt return. How about that? Baby steps.
I think probably the most indicting part of this Ravens special teams performance coming into today was, like, you look at the unit by unit breakdowns on DVOA, which accounts for opponents, efficiency, all that stuff, and there was not really like a single elite unit. Justin Tucker obviously having a year from hell, but the kickoffs haven't been good, the kickoff returns haven't been good, the punts haven't been good, the punt returns haven't been good. They've all ranged from okay to like just downright mediocre. So for the Ravens in pretty much all phases of the game to have a nice performance, I think definitely, just what the doctor ordered, this wasn't a game where they needed to really win on the margins, but for them to show up as decisively as they did today against a really good Denver special teams unit, you absolutely take that and run with it.
And I would like to see Deontay Johnson maybe take some punt returns, some kick returns as they wait for Deontay Hardy to get back, because I think they're, like we said with the offense, they're slow playing Deontay Johnson already. So, maybe the reason we didn't see him today is because they want to get him more acclimated. And he already had a lot on his plate being traded on Tuesday.
And we could see Keaton on kickoff returns.
Yeah, true. Keaton Mitchell, not active as we mentioned, but could be coming back soon. How about the fact that John Harbaugh won a challenge for the first time since January 2023?
Small victories.
How about it? 0 for 6. 0 for 6 since the.
Yeah, I think it was very, very funny to hear the crowd get themselves worked up into a tizzy at the sight of the red flag. Is like, man, you guys are clearly forgetting how this usually ends for you.
Yeah.
It's like a Marvel fan getting really excited for a trailer, and then they realize, oh, you actually go see the movie in just 2.5 hours with Drek.
I mean, that was a questionable one when he made it. I'll be honest. I did not think the Ravens were going to win that challenge. It was 4th and 1, and it's just so hard to win the challenges where it's just spotting a ball. But when it was that obvious, they were able to win that challenge, and it was a turnover. So, that ended up being a slightly big momentum play in the first half.
Yeah, coaches need confidence too.
They do. All right, Jonas. Also, I don't know the name of the head referee that had the mic in this game, but my favorite part of this game was still, despite all of the incredible firepower and the fireworks from Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry combining for 5 touchdowns, my favorite part of this game was still the head referee at the end of every quarter and every 2-minute warning. This is the end of the first quarter. Just the dramatics, the gravitas with which he spoke.
It speaks to the performer in you.
Truly.
Less to me. To me, it's cringe.
And I felt like I had to bring it at the start of this podcast by saying it is, that I take a page from his book. I'm sure he's listened to many of our episodes, but just the way that he pronounced every single end of quarter was, and at the end of the game, it was 41-10. All the teams are handshaking in the middle, and he goes, "This is the end of the game." Thank you.
Maybe he does some voiceovers for our friends over at Toyota.
He might. We have a short week here because we have a podcast on Tuesday, which we will go live with breaking news if the Ravens make a trade before the 4 p.m. deadline. If not, we will come to you sometime after that 4 p.m. deadline to talk about how they didn't make a move. And we will be previewing the Bengals game in that podcast as well. So we will have a lot to talk about Election Day. That is the most, whether the Ravens get a pass rusher or not, is definitely going to be the most important outcome of Tuesday for our country.
Should I have tweeted today Lamar Jackson hitting versus this Broncos defense like the Iowa Seltzer poll.
No, and I'm glad you shouldn't have even said it on this podcast either. So
A lot of talk on Twitter yesterday about the Seltzer poll.
at Jonas_Shaffer is his Twitter handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports.
Both trending topics in my life.
Yes. Also the trending topic of, instead of our Darius Washington, just Darius Washington, I believe. Forgot the AR.
Apostrophe erasure.
Yeah, apostrophe erasure. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Write us a good review of the Banner Ravens podcast, and I will read it out here on the show, including your username and your insightful comments about the Banner Ravens podcast.
And your social security number.
Social security number, which you will be kind enough to provide. Thanks so much for tuning in. We, as mentioned, we will catch you again on Tuesday. And of course, subscribe to the Baltimore Banner. Just $1 for 6 months. Jonas is writing great stuff. Kyle Goon is writing great stuff. Gianna Hahn writing great stuff as well. And we will get you ready for this big interdivision matchup against the Bengals on Thursday.